It was sunny this morning, but still fall-like cool. I was lucky enough to find this small house, perfect for me, for less than $100,000. It stood on top of a hill and had 2 acres of land, as well as a detached 2-car garage, sprawling gardens, and a chicken coop. I had 2 covered porches, one on the east side and one on the west side, from which I could watch both sunrise and sunset. As long as the weather was tolerable, I liked to have my morning coffee and bagel on the east porch. This morning it was cloudy, foggy, and morning haze. It looked like it could rain at any moment, but there wasn't enough wind for the rain to travel far enough across the porch for me to get soaked. My black Labrador Randy and Maine Coon Fiddlehead sat at my feet, their food lying on the porch. But their appetites were quenched. It would have been a perfect morning for a retired woman like me if it weren't for the one thing I missed the most, a husband. I loved this place so much. It was just west of the Daniel Boone National Forest, so you could see trees in the distance, but my lot was mostly cleared. Rowan County is a poor neighborhood, which is why I was able to buy it so cheaply. When I sold my house in Lexington upon retiring, I made enough money to not only pay off the rest of my mortgage, but more than enough to buy this place for cash. 43 years in banking left me with a solid retirement package, comfortable if not rich. Trouble was, I was divorced and alone. I never thought about my ex-husband again. He's been dead for 24 years, and I wouldn't want to, would I? But yesterday, Tracy brought me news that got me thinking again. Blaine has also retired and is moving back to our hometown of Moorhead. Poor Blaine. He was in the Air Force, which meant we were moving all over the country. We had been married for 22 years when he found out I had cheated on him and divorced me. I resisted. I didn't want a divorce, but he was so hurt he just couldn't trust me ever again. Since I had been married to him his entire military career, I was getting half of his military pension, and that pissed him off. Blaine knew I was cheating on him, but he had no real proof to show in court, and in Virginia that meant a no-fault divorce was all he could get. He was stationed at Langley Air Force Base, and I was working at a credit union, a loan officer at the time, when Harry showed up. Heck, Harry was really cute. Sure, I could have just ignored him and not flirted with him, but Harry was the kind of guy who flirted on his own, and he was pretty good at it. About 5 years younger than me, with plenty of youthful energy, I responded to his flirting, and he saw it. I kept telling him that no, I was married, and that doing anything while we worked in the same department was a sure way to get fired. Maybe I was telling him that what we do while we work in the same department is almost a surrender, a subtle way of saying, if only things were different. That's not what I meant to say, but yes, he could take it that way. It took Harry nearly 3 months, and Blaine being sent to Incirlik Air Base in Turkey on an unaccompanied business trip, to get in my pants. My husband was gone, and I had to take care of the house and the kids alone. I was lonely and horny, and Harry took notice of me. I let Harry take me to a very nice seafood restaurant just across the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel on Willoughby Spit, with an outdoor dinner and a view of the Chesapeake Bay. It was raining that night, so we sat inside, but the restaurant had a huge wall of windows overlooking the bay, and it was so nice to watch the rain over the water. The kids weren't home. Tracy was at William and Mary, and Blaine Jr. was in military school, so there was no one waiting for me at home. There was no doubt what was on Harry's mind as he drove me to his house in Grandview, all the way to the end of Beach Road, then to Adriatic, to one of the houses on Back River, with its own boat dock. I shouldn't have gone, I knew I shouldn't, but I did, and we were sitting in the backyard by his boat, drinking wine when he kissed me. I knew what he wanted, and I knew he was going to kiss me, but I let it happen anyway. Not half an hour later we were in the house, with the windows open and to the singing of birds, frogs, and crickets, and Harry was already taking my clothes off. I never stopped him. They'll find out, they always do. I'd heard it before, and naturally Liu, one of my employees, realized what was going on. She warned me that things like this don't stay secret. When Kimmy guessed it too, I realized that there was no way it would get to my husband unless I ended it immediately. Kimmy said that my husband, when he found out, would probably kill Harry with a pickaxe. Blaine was still in Turkey, so he wouldn't find out until a few weeks later when he got back. So maybe I could end the affair right away and get my life back on track. I told Harry about my decision. I wanted to end things now before we got into serious trouble. Harry wasn't married, so he didn't have any problems. None at all. I might have. But silly me, when I told Harry, I let him ask me out, and as you guessed, we ended up right in bed. A last hurrah, so to speak. And what was even stupider was that our last hurrah happened in the one place I'd never let Harry fuck me. In my own home, in my and Blaine's bed. So what happened? The next morning, Saturday, Tracy flew into my room with a cheery, "Good morning, Mom," and froze in place when she saw Harry, who was still asleep next to me, in our marital bed. She just exclaimed, "Oh my God," and ran out of the house. I could hear her crying as she left. I didn't expect to see her home that weekend, and I was completely blown away. Tracy loved her dad and said she was going to tell him. I begged her not to, and the most I got was a promise not to tell him, at least until he got back from Incirlik. Too many bad things could happen in Turkey, and he didn't need to be distracted and angry about my cheating. It was a good thing Tracy was in college. I don't know how cold the atmosphere would have been if she had been living under my roof. She agreed not to tell BJ, that's Blaine Jr., until his dad got back, because we both knew he'd call his dad right away. And I just hoped I'd have time to find a way to make things right. It's simple, Mom. Dad is due back in 3 weeks, on Friday. I'll come home this Saturday, be here at noon, and tell him. You have that much time to confess to him yourself before I drop the bomb. I don't know, maybe it'll go better if you tell him yourself, but one way or another he'll know by noon Saturday anyway. You just have to decide how he's going to find out. It was the worst night of my life. Blaine told me just as he grabbed me, hugged me, and lifted me into the air that he had just gotten word. He was being promoted to Senior Master Sergeant. He was so happy and couldn't wait until I was home and in bed. For dinner, I had already planned to make a simple meal, really good sandwiches, but nothing critical. I didn't think Blaine would want to eat before taking me to bed. But then again, I didn't know how tired he was after the long flight from Germany. Anyway, things happened as I thought more likely. He wanted to make love to his wife as soon as we got home, and I couldn't blame him since we hadn't seen each other in 9 months. I tried to get into it, I really did, but the sex itself? I was too nervous and guilty to remember that I'd slept with Harry for 3 months. The last time in that bed. I considered getting rid of the bed and getting a new one, but I knew Blaine would want to know why. I didn't have any good options. If I bought a new bed and put it here, Blaine would find out before we even made love on it, and if I didn't, Blaine would find out the next day that Harry had slept with me in our marital bed. Saturday morning, Blaine made love to me again, and this time I felt better. I knew I only had a few hours left before Tracy came home, and I needed one last chance to prove to my husband how much I loved him. Blaine wasn't as needy, wasn't as rough as last night, and I was able to enjoy not sex, but love. After we were done, I got up to take my morning shower and then got dressed. Blaine went to get cleaned up, and I went into the living room, sat down in the padded chair, and just started crying. I knew when he came out, I'd have to tell him everything. When I heard the bathroom door open for him to get out of the shower, I looked at the grandfather clock. It was 11:17. Tracy was due in 43 minutes, and I didn't have time. A couple minutes later, my wonderful, darling husband walked into the living room and saw me crying. "Emily, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" The grandfather clock showed 11:20. "Sit down! Sit down! I have something to tell you." It was easier to write it down now. As I said it, I was shaken by sobs. I could see Blaine's face. He knew I was about to blurt out something serious, but he didn't know what. He had thoughts of cheating running through his head, but he might as well have assumed I was sick or something. He is a strong man and tried to stay calm as he sat in the other chair, leaned forward, put his elbows on his knees, and waited for me. 11:21. "Blaine, I stammered half a word. then lunged forward, falling to my knees in front of him, grabbing his hands, holding on to them with all my might. I finally managed to pull out, "Blaine, I was having an affair." My husband wrenched his hands away from me, leaning back heavily in his chair, and I just clung to his knees, hugging them and begging for forgiveness. For a minute or so, he didn't say anything, just stared at me, his face an emotionless mask. The clock read 11:23. Then he jumped up from his chair, shouting, "Damn it!" over and over again. As he jumped up, he practically knocked me over, and I stretched out on the living room carpet. For a minute, I thought he was going to kick my ass, but he never did. Then he grabbed his wallet and keys and sprinted out of the house. Tracy got home before the appointed time and was sitting in her car outside. When she saw Blaine jump into his F-150 and drive away, burning rubber, she realized I had confessed and went into the house early at 11:40. She found me lying on the couch crying profusely. "That didn't go very well, did it?" Her voice was almost impassive. "It was the end of my marriage. 11:23 a.m., Saturday, April 24th, 1993. Oh, it still took a while because the courts were taking their time. Even though Blaine knew he had no proof, no pictures, no witnesses, Tracy could have told him about the affair, but she would never testify against me, so the divorce was no fault. I didn't want that. I wanted my husband back, but although I resisted a little at first, I wasn't stupid enough to contest it for long. Blaine had left me no hope of reconciliation. Harry was the branch manager. He was going to be promoted to district manager. I had every chance of taking the branch manager's job. It all came crashing down when Kimmy figuratively used an axe for a pickaxe and informed the corporation that we were having an affair. Harry was fired and I wasn't, because it was a supervisor-subordinate affair, but I was put on probation, and I realized I no longer had a future at the credit union. At least Kimmy didn't get the branch manager position. They brought in someone from the outside, and we all knew he had to instill a no-nonsense attitude. I had to stay in Virginia until the divorce was finalized. There was no way I was going to leave and let the court do anything to me without being able to defend myself. Fortunately, Blaine didn't have any admissible evidence of my adultery, and the lawyers agreed. It was pretty plain and simple. We were going to sell the house. Blaine had already thrown our bed in the dumpster and split the profits 50-50. Since Blaine was making almost twice as much as I was, he would have to pay me child support for 3 years. We were both supporting children, but both of us were over 18, so there was no alimony, just college expenses. Blaine barely had time to put on his Chief Master Sergeant's stripes before he retired. I was going to get half of his pension, and I figured he'd be damned if he'd let it get any higher than it was. He knew a lot, got involved with Lockheed Martin and got a big raise, though I never found out how much it was. That was it. I'd had enough of this fucking state, and the last thing I wanted to think about was Harry in Virginia. I was sending out my resumes and things were picking up after the recession. The .coms were just budding, the economy was booming, and I got a good offer from a bank in Lexington, Kentucky. Since Blaine and I were both originally from Moorhead, it was like coming home. I heard that Blaine had moved to Orlando because of his job. The divorce was very hard on the kids. Tracy, of course, was the only one who caught me with Harry, so she knew all about it. BJ heard from his father's side first, I guess, but my husband didn't really know what had happened, only that I was having an affair. Our family was really split. BJ joined the Air Force, and naturally he was sent all over the place, to Idaho, to Florida, and then to horrible Fairbanks, Alaska, 60 below zero in Alaska. Tracy had a degree in finance from William and Mary and was working at some financial institution in Arlington. I talked to my kids a lot on the phone, but never got to see them. When the 3 years were up, I received my last child support check from Blaine, wrapped in a single piece of stationery paper on which he scrawled, "Fuck you, bitch! This is the last fucking penny I'll ever have to send your cheating ass. Eat shit and die." I couldn't help myself. I broke down and cried. I hoped that as time passed, his anger would subside, but it seemed he was just as fiercely angry as the day I confessed my cheating to him. Nevertheless, it was 1997, and the economy was booming. There was even talk that the government might balance the budget. Banking, of course, was going great, and I was slowly but surely climbing up the career ladder. I completed my bachelor's and then a master's degree at night school, which helped my career prospects immensely. For the last 2 years, I've been saving alimony anyway and just living on my income. I started at 6%, but increased my 401k contributions to 8% of my paycheck and plan to keep increasing each year. When the new Roth IRA law was passed, I immediately rolled my future contributions there. I'd rather pay taxes then than get a tax bill when I retire. But if my career was fine, my personal life wasn't so great. Tracy told me that Blaine had found someone else, a girl from Florida, and had gotten married there. I didn't want to know too much about her. As for me, I'd had a few dates over the years, but they hadn't led to anything good. The experience with Harry had weaned me off watching men seduce women, though I was now single and couldn't get into the same trouble if I found a real boyfriend. I ate out a lot, as I had no interest in cooking just for myself, and had bought a house on Sycamore Road, not far from Henry Clay's estate in Ashland. I could walk to work in 15 minutes if I wanted to, though I usually drove. It paid off when Lexington got snow, which the city officials cleared handily, because I could always get to work. When the recession hit after the September 11 attacks, I found myself in the negative on my mortgage, but I didn't lose my job like so many others and just kept making the payments. I knew that real estate values would eventually recover and then I would be sitting in safety. But I was still sitting pretty lonely. The 2007-2009 recession was even worse, and Tracy, who by then was working at Lehman Brothers, lost her job and much of her nest egg. It looked like this recession was going to be long and bad, so I asked her to come live with me. I had plenty of room and was going through another depression. But once things recovered and finances started growing again, I thought my reputation would help her find a decent job in Lexington. It took a long time for the economy to recover, and although Tracy worked part-time as a waitress, I told her it wasn't necessary, but having any job is always better for a resume than a long period of unemployment. She spent a lot of time at home with me when I was free from work. The fact that I had no boyfriends, that no man had ever called me, she noticed. I was 55 years old, hardly fit for dating. "Do you still miss your daddy?" she asked me one day. It was so hard for me to answer, but finally I squeezed out, "Yes, I do." "Do you still love him?" Another hard question. "Yes, honey, I do. There's no one in the world better than your father." "So why?" I knew what she meant, and for the first time in years she asked why I was having an affair. And that was the problem. Yes, I was lonely. Yes, I missed my husband while he was overseas, but I didn't really have any reason, not one good reason. I was just seduced, but I have to admit that I knew it was coming and I let myself be seduced. It was saucy and fun, and the sex wasn't bad, though no better than with Blaine, and not really all that good, and it just felt good to have a man paying attention to me. I thought Blaine had cheated on me before with that bitch Colleen from Langley, but I never knew for sure. Maybe he hadn't, and even if he had, it didn't excuse my actions. I threw my marriage away, for no damn reason. I had a nice house in one of Lexington's best neighborhoods, but the double bed in my bedroom still only slept alone. I had long since gotten used to sleeping alone, but it was still an empty existence. It was 2011 when I was finally able to find Tracy a professional job again. The financial markets were booming, though the rest of the economy was still struggling, and my reputation and connections helped her land a job at a mid-sized brokerage firm in Lexington. Her experience and education were excellent, but she was competing with young graduates, and that big Lehman Brothers on her resume didn't help much. As for me, I was doing well, and I had made up my mind. I'm going to retire at 60, just because I can, sell the house on Sycamore and buy a nice place out of town. If I'm going to be alone, at least it's better to be alone without seeing everyone around me pairing off. I asked one of my old high school friends to look out for what I needed, and so in 2013 she found me the perfect house. Housing prices in cities were finally starting to recover, but in rural areas and small towns, not so much. Like I said, I bought the place at a great price. 2 years later, at the end of 2015, sitting on the porch of a house on the eastern slope, sipping coffee and watching the sun rise over the woods and hills, I realized I had been divorced as long as I had been married. The few dates I'd had while I was working were long gone, and I'd never, ever, not once woken up with someone other than Fiddlehead in the bed next to me, not in this house. Truth be told, it had only happened a few times in all that time, since the last time I'd woken up next to Blaine that Saturday in April, 22.5 years ago. Even with Harry, I'd never stayed the night because Blaine could always call home from Turkey. In 1993, everyone still had landlines. It wasn't until that fucking night when I foolishly slept with him at my house, Blaine's house and mine, that I woke up with him the next morning, and look what it cost me. Sometimes I thought back and regretted that morning. If Tracy hadn't shown up out of the blue, Blaine would never have found out about my cheating and we'd still be married enjoying retirement. Damn, what a mess I'd made of my life. Moorhead is a small town, and when Tracy brought me the news that Blaine had gone home, I wondered if I'd ever meet him again. And would I recognize him at all? He was divorced for the third time, Tracy told me, having survived 2 young wives in Florida, and apparently both had cheated on him. He lived in his parents' old house, but he didn't own it himself. He had to share it with his 3 siblings, and they just hadn't gotten around to selling it when Blaine retired. If he wanted it, he'd have to buy them out. It could very loosely be called a renovation, and after all those years at Lockheed, he probably had the money for it. But Blaine wasn't a jack of all trades and didn't like to take on projects like that himself. I was sure he'd want his own place, even if it was an apartment, and would just take 1/4 of what his parents' old house would sell for. I went up with Betty Lou, whom we'd been friends with since high school. She was a cheerleader and president of the Rowan County High School Cheer Club, knew everyone in town except Moorhead State University students, and had lived in Moorhead all her life. Her husband owned the most successful insurance agency in town, and Betty Lou sold real estate. She was the kind of agent who sold 3 different houses to the same people, and her husband, like her, knew everyone in town. Any one of them could have been mayor if they tried, but none of them showed the slightest interest in politics. I don't even know who they voted for. I had to ask her, was Blaine looking for a house? Emily, why are you asking me that? You know that unless you're interested in selling him some real estate, I can't really tell you anything good. Betty Lou, please, if you know something, you have to tell me. I really need to know. Are you trying to get back to him? I mean, I can't think of any other reason why you're asking me this. I wasn't exactly crying, but my eyes got a little watery. Oh shit, I don't know. I messed up so bad. I would never say messed up so bad, not in front of Betty Lou attending church, and we shouldn't have gotten divorced, but he's probably still mad at me. After all these years? What the hell happened between you two? I guess I should have expected that question. If I answered it truthfully, it would hurt my credibility in Betty Lou's eyes, but hell, lying was pointless. If she ever talked to Blaine, he'd probably call me a lying, cheating whore, and then she'd know the truth. I had an affair, I admitted, my voice getting a little quieter. That's when I started to sob. Betty Lou, I screwed up so horribly. I never wanted to do anything like that, and I didn't want to lose Blaine, but he was away, in Turkey, and I was lonely, and I let myself be seduced by a guy from the credit union I worked at. I was going to break up with him, but Tracy caught us at the very end. She threatened to tell Blaine if I didn't confess, and when I did confess to him, he left, and the only time we were back together was in court. I hadn't expected this from the straight-talking Betty Lou, but she put her arms around me, comforting me, reassuring me. Oh, Emily, I don't know. At school, Blaine always knew how to hold a grudge. Remember when he kicked Jerry Smith's ass after Jerry tried to hit on a girl he was trying to date and said he'd kick his ass again when he saw him? That was Cindy. Little Cindy Louval, remember? The little freshman tease. She was a big bully, wasn't she? Betty Lou giggled to disrupt my crying. I've heard she did a lot more than tease when it came to doing things. My mom wouldn't let me have anything to do with her. Blaine told me he never climbed into her pants. Of course, he could have just said that. You know how guys are. Except for your Eric, of course, I quickly added. He wasn't like that. No, he really wasn't like that. Good, dependable, upstanding Eric never does anything wrong. Then I realized Betty Lou understood my distress because she herself had flirted with Eric, or at least been sorely tempted to. In the most vulgar corners of my brain, I could picture it. Still, it was a lot more than I'd been getting for the past 24 years, wasn't it? Blaine wasn't bad. He liked a lot of different positions. Harry was decent and inventive in bed, too, but I'd take artificial sex once a month with a man who loves me for what I'd had since April 24th, 1993. There was silence between us for a few seconds, while Betty Lou sort of gathered her thoughts. Okay, Emily, I really shouldn't tell you this, but yes, Blaine is looking for a new place to live. He wants an apartment, not a house, but he has a certain list. First floor, as few stairs as possible, in good condition, and that the neighbors aren't Morehead State students. That's actually hard to find. No steps, I wondered. Blaine was always energetic and in shape. I guess you haven't seen him in a while, right? He's diabetic and he hurt his leg somehow. Walking is hard for him now, and being diabetic, whatever happened to him is slow to heal. No, Tracy never told me that. Tracy was always protective of her father, and after the divorce, she only told me the bare minimum. He's not in a wheelchair, is he? I've never seen him in one, but I've seen him use a crutch. Oh, poor Blaine. No wonder he wants to get away from his family's old house. It's 2 stories high. Yes, and it's a little dilapidated. The family wants to sell it, but I'll be lucky if I get $60,000 for it. What do you think would happen if I just accidentally bumped into it? Well, I know he usually eats lunch at the American Legion Hall on Old Cranston Road. I think he enjoys the company there, and he probably doesn't like to cook for himself. But if he's still holding a grudge, it's not a good place to accidentally run into him. Can you imagine if he freaks out and starts calling you names in public? If you want to see him again, you'd better go to Tracy. It was advice I didn't want to hear, but it made sense. Tracy loved us both, and if she was more protective of her father than she was of me, I could accept that. Perhaps it was some hyper-compensation on her part, since she looked so much like me. Except for the brown eyes she inherited from her father, she looked like me, only 24 years younger. Right around the age I had to confess to Blaine that I cheated on him. That probably wouldn't do me much good. I called Tracy the night after she had to get off work. It turned out she had a business meeting this afternoon, but she said she could call me the next night. I gave her a quick heads up so she could think about it. I told her I wanted to talk to her about setting up a meeting between me and Blaine. I think I shocked her. You know Daddy has a hard time walking, don't you? Tracy started the next evening. Yes, Betty Lou told me, but I'd like to make him a nice dinner here, just the 3 of us. Will he be able to walk up the steps? Yes, I think he can. His arms are still strong, and you have a sturdy railing going up the steps, and the steps are only 4. It's a good thing you have a bathroom on the 1st floor. I had been worried all day. Tracy had arranged to have dinner on Saturday when she was supposed to have the day off because I wanted her to attend. I was still nervous, but I knew Blaine, most likely, wouldn't go on a tirade about my affair that happened so long ago, not with Tracy. Besides, Tracy provided plenty of opportunities for small talk about her life, just in case the conversation between Blaine and I about our own lives took an awkward turn. I made fried chicken, something I've always been good at, green beans and warm potato salad with arugula, which I'd only learned about a few years ago. I had some artificial sweetener on hand for Blaine's coffee, and I consulted Betty Lou, who is also diabetic, about what I should and shouldn't eat for dinner. She seemed genuinely happy for me that Blaine was coming. When she told me that she had found an apartment that fit Blaine's list of criteria, I asked her to please not tell Blaine about it, at least not until after dinner. Emily, that would be unethical. It's what he was looking for, and if I wait, someone else might grab it. Well, maybe you can tell him about it, but somehow arrange to show it to him next Monday instead of right away? Betty Lou was quiet for a few seconds before agreeing, but warned that if Blaine tried to insist on seeing him sooner, she would have to agree. After all, Blaine was her client. And Blaine did just that. He saw the apartment Friday morning and told Betty Lou he wanted it. The apartment was $700 a month, the lease was for 1 year, with the first and last month's rent paid at the signing of the agreement. Blaine knew about our dinner the next day, but decided to rent an apartment in town anyway. Betty Lou warned me about it. I know she heard on the phone how upset I was. Nevertheless, there was still Saturday night dinner left, and I was still going to make the best of it. Maybe I really had no chance of us ever getting back together again, but I was going to at least try. 24 years after my disastrous affair and our divorce, I still loved Blaine. It wasn't as intense, it was something cool that was under the surface, barely perceptible, but it was still there. And I was Blaine's first true love. We lost our virginity to each other, as we usually did, on prom night. No matter how angry he was at me, no matter how much he hated me now, no man ever forgets the first women he slept with. Somewhere, maybe very deep down inside, he had to still love me. He just had to. The sun was peeking through my bedroom window Sunday morning, and it was glorious. Fiddlehead was curled up in my lap, and to my right lay Blaine, still asleep, but with a smile on his face like I hadn't seen in 24 years. It was hard for Blaine to walk up to my bedroom on the second floor, but he made it. Diabetes had impaired his circulation and robbed him of his former sexual potency. When Tracy saw what was going on and discreetly excused herself, he told me he did. But at that point, I didn't care. Maybe Viagra would help him with that later, but I had the one thing I really needed, my husband, waking up with me in the morning.